Hi guys, it's Tuesday again, so welcome to our Follow the Money course. I hope everybody is doing very well. Today we'll be talking about banks, which of course are central to high-level money laundering and to the business of organized crime and of corrupt politicians. I have coordinated in the past 10 years quite a few projects looking at how banks, small and large, enable criminals to move their money. And frankly, when you look at it, the situation is quite bleak. Let's take, for instance, the Russian laundromat. This is a case of more than 20 billion US dollars worth of money laundering, right? When you look at the banks involved, and we put them in this bar chart here, the situation is quite amazing because we see some of the largest banks in the world, including Danske Bank, Bank of China, HSBC, and many others, receiving money from what was clearly a high-level money laundering scheme originating in Russia. So, how does this work? How can a small bank, let's say that's in the pocket of criminals, wire money abroad, wire money to another country? It's pretty clear that it can't do so directly. The dollars, the euros won't flow from the small bank to the world directly because the small bank doesn't have the necessary means to do so. So, for the small bank to be able to wire money, it needs a bank account. It needs a bank account just like a physical person, but the bank account needs to be with a much larger bank that has a very good position in the global financial systems. And we're talking here about the big banks such as Deutsche Bank, such as HSBC, such as Danske Bank, and many others. So these are the banks that open up the world for the smaller banks. Now, these bank accounts that need to be opened with the bigger banks by the small banks are called corresponding bank accounts. Now, on the side of the big banks, they need to respect one main rule when it comes to opening up these corresponding bank accounts. And this is named in jargon KYC, which is Know Your Customer. Now, besides this KYC Know Your Customer, which means that the large bank needs to know exactly who the small bank is in order to open up this bank account that will give the small bank access to the world's financial systems, they also need to know, they need to respect this KYCC, which is Know Your Customer's Customer, which is that the large banks need also keep an eye on who the customers of the small banks are. So what we saw in the case of the laundromats, these huge money laundering operations, was that large banks were completely ignoring not only KYC, but in many cases also KYCC. So we had, a few instances when small banks that were operated by criminals hidden behind offshores were able to open up corresponding bank accounts with larger banks. And this despite the fact that the large bank couldn't have vetted, couldn't have seen who was behind those offshores that owned the small bank. In many other cases, we had the KYCC ignored, where you actually had a small bank, a client of a small bank sending billions via a bank account, via a corresponding bank account in a large bank, and the large bank did not ask any question. One blatant case in the Russian laundromat was that of an offshore company called Westburn Enterprises Limited, which was able to wire from a bank in Moldova billions of dollars to another bank in Latvia, which is in the European Union. And from there, money went, to Denmark, to Cyprus, to Hong Kong, to many other countries around the world. So Westburn, what was interesting about Westburn was that it was set up by a formation agent from Scotland who also provided the beneficiary owner of the bank account. So, of course, the formation agent had no business with the company, but they obscured the real beneficiaries of this company by using a name of someone who was working in the offices of the formation agent. None of the money sent by a company owned by Maurice Walters should have gone through the world's financial systems. But it did, and we're talking about billions. And in the case of Danske Bank, we're talking about many, many billions. We're talking about more than 200 billions worth of money laundering. So these are staggering amounts of money. This is what undermines the fabric of the financial system of the world. So really, all that criminals, high-level criminals, and corrupt politicians have to do right now is to put in their pocket a small bank and be able to open up a bank account with a larger bank. If these conditions are fulfilled, then they can go about their dirty business at ease. But corrupt bankers do more than this for the benefit of the criminals. They issue fraud manuals, manuals that teach the criminal how to do the money laundering undetected. These fraud manuals teach the criminal to not send, big numbers, to not send 1 million or 10 billion or these numbers, but to fragment the payments when they wire the money. It also teaches them things like don't say you imported or exported something, that's a really large volume if you don't own a railway, if you're not near a port, and so on and so on. I'll actually attach one of these fraud manuals, to this course, so you see for yourself what they contain. These instructions are around what is called trade-based money laundering, which is how most of the money laundering is done on the back of fictitious invoices that mention that goods were sold from point A to point B, when in fact only money is moved around. But we'll talk about trade-based money laundering in a later course. What really is sort of amazing about this large money laundering scheme is that the big banks pretend they have no idea about this happening. So I'll attach to this course this document, which was issued by Deutsche Bank. Is an internal Deutsche Bank document. Deutsche Bank being one of the big banks, right, that allow lots of other smaller banks to access the international financial system. And this is a document where they talk about the Russian laundromat scheme, and they say here they only found out about the scheme after my organization OCCRP published this Russian laundromat series of articles. So they even used our graphics in highlighting what was going on and all that. This is sort of amazing, right? Because you'd expect a bank of the level of Deutsche Bank, to be able to detect money laundering when it happens. Now, there are many problems on the side of large banks, and we'll discuss them at a later time. But this document is kind of an eye-opener when it comes to how these big banks conduct their Know Your Customer and their KYCC, their Know Your Customer's customer. So this also tells us, I believe, that our work as journalists is very, very important when it comes to the banking sector. And I think we don't focus enough on what's going on with the large banks, with the small banks, with how these banks are used by criminals around the world to launder their money. So please focus on banks. The homework attached to this course you'll see is actually about banks, and you'll have to look behind the ownership structure of one of the banks in your countries, and please treat banks just as regular companies, because this is what they are, right? They are just a commercial company, a commercial enterprise that happens to sell and buy money. So thank you again for watching this, and I wish you a good week, and we'll see each other next time, next Tuesday. Thanks, bye.